Alright, this is Miss Benson here with SanfordFlipMath, and we are using the Springboard textbook with our Algebra 2 class. And this time we are working on lesson 15, 1 and 2, and this is all on adding, subtracting, and multiplying polynomials. So we're just going to start with something very simple, something we've seen before for sure, okay? And all I'm asking you to do is simplify this expression here. So when we simplify, first of all, I'm going to group my like terms together. Okay, so group like terms. In this case, our like terms have the same variable. Okay, so this has an x in it, so does this, and so does this. Now let's make sure that this is our negative 8x that we're grouping together and not just 8x. Okay. So I'm going to write all those together, my 14x minus 8x plus x, and then I'm going to group my constants together. So that's something, these don't have a variable, so that's why they're like in this case. Okay, so I'm going to add my 5 and my 14, put those together, this ends up being 19, 14 minus 8 plus x plus 1x gives us our 7x plus 19. And we've got that expression simplified. Alrighty. Okay, now we're going to look at something a little bit more complicated. Now we're talking about polynomials. So this has anything that could have, maybe something to the third power in this case, or something to the fifth power or the seventh power. If we're seeing anything with this, what we did before, we added polynomials. These are just a little bit more complex. We're seeing a few more different types of terms. Okay, so now we're asked to add these two polynomials together to make one polynomial. Now, the first case, don't let the parentheses throw you off. Okay? Okay, I'm just going to write this as, because all we're talking about here is the way things are grouped. And when this may be throwing you back a little ways, but the associative property, which is basically the way things are grouped. Oops, here I'm going to undo that. Okay, the associative property has to do with grouping. Okay, now when we add things, you're going to get the same answer no matter how they're grouped. Okay, so it follows addition is an operation that follows the associative property. So I'm just going to drop the parentheses first of all. That basically allows me to add these in any sort of order with or without the parentheses. Okay, so I'm going to write this as 3x, oops, sorry, that's a cubed. 3x cubed plus my 2x squared. Just rewrite this whole thing. Okay, because again, addition is associative. Okay, so I can group this any which way. I could write my parentheses here and then add everything together, or I can put parentheses over here and then add things together. It doesn't matter how I do this. So I'm just going to drop the parentheses all together. Okay, now I'm going to group my like terms. Okay, so I'm going to follow my grouping again. In this case, like terms, we have a lot of different things that all have x's in them. But the other thing that we have to worry about when we group things together is whether they have the same exponent. So in this case, since we have many things that have the same variable, we also have to look at which ones have the same exponent, and those are the ones we're going to group together. Okay, so the first thing is we have only one x cubed term. So I'm going to write this one as 3x cubed. We've got a couple x squared terms. Okay, so I'm going to group both of those together. Then we've got x to the first power, right? Those can both be to the first power if we wanted to. We're going to leave those out, but so then I'm going to have my negative 5x and my 2x. And then as far as constants go, I've got a couple here. So I'm going to write these ones here, these two. I'm going to rewrite them in black so that we can see them instead of that yellow. But those we're going to group together as well. Okay. So now all we have to do is simplify. Okay. So our second step here is just to simplify, which is you can also think about as combining. Okay. So I've got my 3x cubed. My 2x squared plus 4x squared is 6x squared. Negative 5x. Oops, sorry, this was a plus 2x. That's my bad there from above here. That should be a plus. Okay, negative 5x plus 2x is going to give me negative 3x. And add my 7 and negative 3. I got a 4. Okay, so this is, when we're talking about simplifying, this is all we're trying to get to. Okay, so we're going to do one more example, and I'm just going to show you a different way of putting these together. So again, this is, we can drop our parentheses, so I'm just going to rewrite this as 4x, whoops, I keep writing those exponents wrong. So my 4x minus 2x cubed plus 7 minus 9x squared. I'm going to keep this group together. Whoops, no, I wasn't going to keep that group together. Okay. We're just going to rewrite that. Okay, so I'm going to write this as, but I'm going to write this in order of my exponents. So I'm going to write my negative 2x cubed first. Then I'm going to write my negative 9x squared. And then 4x plus 4x. And then plus 7. Now this is in, which we talked about a little bit already, standard form. Okay, so we've got exponents are decreasing in number. Okay, so we go from an x cubed, where our exponent is 3, to an x squared, where it's 2, to one where it's 1, and then this one has a little x to the 0 power in there, but we just don't write that. Okay, so now I've put that in standard form. Now I'm also going to write this other expression underneath it. Now this is just another way of looking at how we can, just another example of how to add these together. Okay, so I'm going to write this right underneath here. So 8x squared minus 6x minus 7. Okay, so I'm just going to stack these. It's just, it doesn't really matter how you do it. If you want to write it doing the previous method or if you want to do it this method, it's just a couple different ways to look at it. Okay, so my negative 2x cubed, I'm not adding or subtracting anything. Negative 9x squared plus 8x squared. Then I end up with minus 2x when I add those, and then plus 0, which, to be honest, I don't really have to write that plus 0. Okay, so I'm just going to leave that off. Okay, so this just gives you a good idea of adding and subtracting. We're grouping things together, putting them in standard form, usually just to make sure that they look nice and neat, and then combining like terms. Okay, so it's going to be the same type of idea with subtracting, except for we just have one little thing to make sure that we take note of. And that's that little subtraction. Okay, so we can't drop the parentheses because we've got the subtraction sign out here. Okay, and it's not associative if we're using subtraction. Okay, so we can't group these parentheses differently if there's a subtraction sign right in the middle of those two parentheses. Okay, because we can write this as plus a negative or plus a negative 1. Okay, that's the same thing. Well, with the negative 1 out there, we have to distribute it to everything in our parentheses. Okay, we have to distribute that negative because it's right before it. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite that as, I'm going to rewrite these. I'm just going to drop my parentheses once I multiply everything through. Okay, so I've got my 2x cubed plus 8x squared plus x plus 10, keeping the parentheses there. Now this is plus I'm distributing that negative through. So I've got my negative 5x squared plus 4x. Let's not forget to change that negative sign. Negative times a negative is a positive. And then minus 6. Okay. So now I can drop my parentheses because we've got it back to addition. Okay. So this is going to be 2x cubed plus 8x squared plus x plus 10 minus or plus negative 5x squared plus 4x minus 6. Okay. So now, just like we did with addition, all I'm going to do is group my like terms. So I've got my x cubes there. I've got my x squareds here. So my plus 8x squared minus 5x squared. My x terms and my constants. Okay, so just like before, we're going to combine these all together and we're going to end up with 2x cubed plus 3x squared plus 5x plus 4. All right, we're going to do one more example with a subtraction, and we're just going to go through that example one more time so you can see it again before we move on into multiplication. Okay, so I'm just going to distribute this negative through, and I'm not going to keep the parentheses this time, but it has to go to 4 different terms instead of just 3 because we have 4 terms in this expression instead of 3. Okay, we've got 3x squared plus 8x cubed minus 9x. Okay, now again, we're doing this plus negative 1 times all of that. So that negative 1 is what we're distributing through. Okay, so we'll just keep grouping this by parentheses just to make sure that this looks, I know I said I was going to stop, but let's just make sure that we keep this consistent. Okay, so we've got negative 2x cubed minus 3x plus 4x squared plus 1. Now we can drop our parentheses, but I'm going to drop them. I'm going to drop and I'm going to rearrange at the same time. So I've got my x cubes I'm going to put together. So my 8x cubed minus 2x cubed and my 3x squared and 4x squared. My negative 9x and negative 3x and my only one, my only constant. Once again, combining like terms. We're just adding them, adding together the coefficients. So when we're adding things, we're adding terms that have the same exponent, okay? We're adding their coefficients, okay? So 8 minus 2 gives us our 6, okay? Nothing else changes. We're just adding the coefficients there. Okay, so now let's take a look at multiplication. And I believe this probably looks really similar to you about to things that you've had to do before. So believe it or not, you have multiplied polynomials before by having to do something like FOIL. Okay, now I'm going to write this, I'm not sure if you've seen it in this way before, but basically when we FOIL, you distribute that x to both the x and the negative 2, because that's your first and that's your outside, right? You multiply your first together and then your outside. So I'm going to write this as x times x minus 2 plus 3 times x minus 2. And that's our x times x gives us our first here. The x times negative 2 gives us our outside. We're doing the same thing there. Okay. Then we get our 3 times x gives us our inside, right? And then the last one, 3 times negative 2, the last, gives us our FOIL. So essentially, we're doing the exact same thing. It's just written in a different way. Okay, but this is going to make things a little bit easier when we have bigger numbers to work with. Okay, so I'm just going to write it this way. So let me rewrite it down below where it's not marked up. Okay, so it's just the x from here, multiplying that by all of x minus 2, and then plus 3 also from here times x minus 2. Whoops, sorry, that was x minus 2. Okay, now we've done this before. We were doing this with the negative with our subtraction. We distribute our x through, okay? So we're practicing our distributive property. We were doing that the same way up there as well when we were distributing our x's to our x's and constants to constants, and everything else up there is also showing us the distributive property, okay? So when we multiply those together, we get x squared minus 2x. Then we have to come over here and do the same thing. So we distribute our 3. So we've got 3 plus 3x minus 6. Okay. That's just practicing our distributive property. Now, based on what we were doing before with adding and subtracting our polynomials, we'd have to group our like terms together. Well, here, everything's grouped together, so we can check that off. Okay, and then we're just combining like terms. So we end up with x squared plus, x squared plus x minus 6. Okay, now that's something, we have multiplied polynomials before. Now let's do the same thing with something a little bit more complicated. Okay, so we're still using our x plus 3, but now we're multiplying it by something much bigger, where we can't just do FOIL. We'd have to add a middle and everything else like that, and that just doesn't make a nice word for us, or a nice mnemonic for us to remember. Okay, so it's the same process or the same idea. So the first thing we need to do is distribute this x to all 3 parts of that other polynomial. Okay, so I'm going to write it as x times my 4x squared plus 6x plus 7. Okay, now I have to do the same thing with my 3. So I'm distributing the 3 to all 3 parts of that polynomial. Okay, so I have my plus 3, because it is a positive 3, that I am distributing to my 4x squared plus 6x plus 7. Okay, so now let's just go through and distribute this. Again, we're just practicing our distributive property. Okay, so I've got 4x cubed plus 6x squared. We're going over here, plus 7x. Now I've got a 3 I'm distributing, so plus 12x squared plus 16x and plus 21. Okay, now we did our nice distributive property here, but now we have to group like we were doing before, just to make sure that everything's together. And I'm going to make sure that this is in standard form. So I'm going to have my x cubed term first. We've only got one of those. Then we've got x squared terms. We've got to make sure we keep together. All right. We've got our x terms and our lone constant in this case. Just got one of them. Okay. So we end up, again, we're combining like terms now. This is our next step, is combining. So we're getting our 4x cubed. Adding those together gives us 18x squared plus 15. Whoops, can't be 15 if we'll redo this. Plus 18x plus 25. Thank you for correcting me, whoever it was that was saying that into the computer when you realized I wasn't adding that right. Okay, plus 25x plus 21. So this is what we get when we multiply these. Again, it's the same type of idea as FOILing. All we're doing is distributing each term through the next polynomial, through the next factor that we have. Okay, so just be very careful about making sure to distribute every part of the other factor. Okay, so we're going to practice this once more. This one looks a little bit more complicated. I'm not gonna lie, it's a little bit more complicated, but again, it's the exact same process. Okay, so we have to distribute this x squared to all three parts of that other polynomial. So I've got my x squared times that whole other factor. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing with my, now, is that a positive x or a negative x? This little negative has to be tied to it. Okay, so minus x times our x squared plus 3x minus 1. Now, and we've done this before already with subtracting a couple slides back with our examples. If we're subtracting something, it's the same as adding the negative of it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to change that into a plus negative. Let me change this, make it look a little bit neater. So I'm going to change this into a plus negative x. So I don't forget to distribute that negative to each part. Okay, now we've got just one more that we have to distribute, and that's that 2 has to go through all of it. So I'm going to do that plus 2 times that other polynomial. Okay. So now all we have left to do is multiply and simplify. Okay, so I'm going to distribute this throughout the parentheses. So I've got x to the 4th, because when we multiply exponents, that we've got x's with different exponents. Well, these have the same exponent, but when we multiply, we have to add the exponents together. Okay, we've got x to the 4th plus 3x cubed minus x squared. Okay, and then we've got minus x cubed, because again, this is like x to the 1st, and when we're multiplying our exponents, or when we're multiplying terms that have different exponents, we add those exponents together. Okay, then we've got negative x times 3x, that gives us negative 3x squared, and then plus x, and then plus 2x squared plus 6x minus 2. All right, now again, all this is grouping like terms. We've got that x to the 4th, it's a lonely one. Our x cubes, we've got just 2 of those. We're going to put those together. Our x squareds, we've got a few of those, so let's make sure that those stay together. Okay. Our x's, just a couple of those, and our lonely constant of negative 2. So we're just combining these once again. So we've got our x to the 4th, our 3x cubed minus x cubed gives us, we're adding our coefficients, we get our 2x cubed. We've got then negative 4 plus 2x squared is negative 2x squared. Combine our terms that have just x's or x to the 1st power as an exponent. We get our 7x, and we end with negative 2. And that is all we have for today. Thank you for watching SanfordFlipMath. We'll see you again. Bye.